Sheena Bailey, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called TestReach. And it is a little odd, I don't often stand up and talk about TestReach and apologise, but essentially the application that we have does make exams easier to run. And I guess why I'm apologising is I know you all have sat exams and you may go on to do sit exams in the future, and essentially this is something that we do. So if we think about exams, a lot of people think about their leaving cert or their college finals. But essentially, you know, why do people take exams? And one of the reasons is that, you know, if I look at the Harvard Medical School, it costs $60,000 to attend there for 1 year. But I can go online and I can read all that course material for free. And why would anybody pay $60,000 to attend if you can read it all for free? And let's answer that with another question, which is, would you let me operate on your loved ones if I told you I'd read the course material? And of course the answer is no, because it's a tried and tested formula to these things. You study the course material, you sit your exam, and you become qualified. But I guess the fact is that there's been an unprecedented demand for qualifications. The reason being that there's a direct correlation between your qualification and how much money you earn and whether you have a job in the first place. And that is absolutely true at every single level until you hit PhD, and then things take a nosedive because everybody thinks you're too intelligent to employ. But the bricks and mortar world that we have today in colleges is simply can't cope with this demand, and so things are moving online. And last year, the online learning growth was at 33% in comparison to sort of the traditional area, which is about 6%. Okay, so we've had I guess for the last 20 years, we've known how to roll out distributed learning through things called LMSs, learning management systems, but there hasn't really been a way to scale exams in the same way. That's both secure, which is the number one, I guess, consideration, and TestReach essentially does that. So what is it? It's a sort of two systems in one. It's a test authoring tool, so we've got lots of different question types, over 40 different question types with things like graphing, essay style, multiple choice question, drag and drop. So everything you could possibly want to make a really interesting exam paper and move away from that one-dimensional paper-based thing. Lots of different configurations around how you set up your papers within it. But I guess where it gets a bit interesting is we also offer a service which is online invigilation. So that is where we have our supervisors in real time monitoring candidates as they take their exam. So now it means you can move them out of an exam hall and let people take their exam from home in a very secure way. And we do that through taking a feed of them through their webcam, taking a screen share feed, taking a two-way audio feed, and also a two-way IM, obviously. But it remains very secure. And a lot of our customers would be struggling with the concept of how they can move either outside their constrained physical space, or a good example, which some of you might have come across, is the Scrum Alliance and Scrum certification. So to be a Scrum Master, you have to go on a 2-day course or a 1-day course, and then you're given a 2-week window to take that exam. But you might not be you actually taking that exam. They have a kind of lenient approach. And they're an ideal customer for us, where you're actually adding value by ensuring that the person who takes the exam is the person who got the qualification. Okay, I am going to stop talking about what we do in a second, I think. Yes. So why Node.js? So that's just a little bit of background about who are the kind of customers we have. So about probably about 3 years ago, we started this journey about building TestReach, and we ended up looking at Node.js. And the reasons behind that were, essentially I worked for a large multinational. They had an aging technology stack which we had to replace. We did a lot of research into the different languages, the different development communities that were out there, how well they were supported, what we thought their future roadmap was. Obviously, Node.js didn't really come up high on their list because it was a big multinational at that point, and Node wasn't quite as popular as it is today. So I applied my own requirements to that, and my requirements were it had to be free, and I had to be able to find a developer, obviously, who could look at that. And then I also talked to a lot of people, developers, architects, people in my communities, and most of them didn't really say go for it, actually, but nobody said no either. So I think they were all a little unsure as to whether this was the right thing to do. But I didn't agonise over the decision. I essentially just thought, well, if I'm rich in 3 years' time, I can always rebuild it in something else if necessary. So essentially that was how we came to use Node. The journey so far, essentially we got off to a flying start, couldn't have asked for more, had a prototype up and running pretty quickly, and then I hit a blocker, and that was essentially that my developer who I was working with had other commitments and couldn't keep going. I really was quite stuck at that point in terms of trying to find somebody, and that's how I got introduced to Nearform, found them, and but actually what ended up happening was that I started to look far short for resources. They also fitted my budget slightly better than the guys here in Dublin, and it's been a pretty smooth journey ever since. A very high-level assessment of our experiences in Node, apart from that kind of slow start, was, and if any of you are old enough to remember this, it does exactly what it says in the tin. From a performance perspective, we've not really even had to engage in that yet. I mean, we're obviously still running at fairly low numbers in comparison to some of the mega applications that are out there. Okay, so it's a bit facetious, but it is child's play. I mean, I was a developer 15 years ago. I did mainly back-end stuff. I had touched on JavaScript, but during those really terrible dark hours when I had nobody to work with, I was able to roll up my sleeves and actually do a little bit. I will say all of that has been stripped out now. I wouldn't have let it run, but essentially it's something that is quite exciting in that way because it leans on other languages. Seems to be reasonably good in terms of integration. We use a fairly good number of components outside our application to bulk it out, and that's no problem. And lastly, the libraries obviously seem to be good and well maintained, but you probably know even more about that than I do. Okay, so what libraries do we use then? We use MongoDB, so obviously that was a natural fit with Node.js in terms of the API and the JSON marriage there, but also because we're a startup and we have customers and we have very demanding customers, it's actually enabled us to kind of keep up with their demands as well. So we have a very fast changing schema, and using MongoDB has essentially taken down the overhead of that massive and constant change. We use Forever as well. I would say, well, I was going to say about Forever, it actually works very well. It's very stable, but that the log files are a bit impenetrable. But having watched your presentation, Damien, I'm not sure if I can say that to this audience, but I find a little bit. Luckily, we haven't had to go there too often. We use secure password library as well. That's obviously really important for us because we're pushing or peddling a very secure system. We need to make sure that all our passwords are sorted and hashed and secure. And we did have a few problems with that, so I'll talk about that on the next slide. And we use Socket.io as well, which is an obvious choice, but again, we had a few problems with that, and I'll talk about that in a sec. We've got a few other APIs and libraries that we use. Within our system, we obviously need to let people know they've been enrolled in an exam, so we send out a series of email notifications and also text messages as well. And when we evaluated what we should use, we were looking at Mandrill. I really liked what Amazon SES offered as well because it had the email and the texting together. But when it came down to it, Mandrill was a little easier for us to interpret straight out of the box. But I reckon we may move to Amazon SES if we ever bulk out that side of things within the application. Also, the texting actually didn't turn out to be such a good bonus feature for us because it only, at the time we evaluated, you could only text within the US, so that was obviously no good for a European-based customer base. So we used Clevo, and again we compared it with Twilio. I think the reason we picked it, if I can recall, is that it has a two-way SMS texting functionality within the UK, and in the US, but nowhere else. So Twilio only had US, and we thought that might become useful to us. And lastly, we use Grunt. To be honest, I can't say an awful lot about this, but it seems to work, and it minimizes all our files and whatever else it's supposed to do. Okay, so in terms of the technology and tools that we're using, nothing too unusual here. We use Bitbucket. We're using Jenkins for our continuous integration up until our certification layer. We're also starting to use Selenium. We've got about a 50% pass on all our screens in Selenium, and then we're based in EC2, and we use Ubuntu. And at the beginning of this year, we went into production mode, and we moved our stack to a 3-tier stack, whereas previously we were just using Ubuntu, and we probably could have kept using Ubuntu from a performance perspective, a single Ubuntu machine, but actually just from a security position we needed to beef that up. So the only problems we really had using Node was Nginx, which we implemented as our proxy server, and it gave me some very sleepless nights and weeks, mainly because it didn't really work out of the box with secure password. We had to do quite a lot of flicking around with that, and then also in terms of the socket.io, there was a few problems with that, and that's where I came across Chris Lea and found his blog on using socket.io and HTTPS and Nginx, and it was a lifesaver, and so we've stuck with him ever since, so hopefully that's good. So why am I here? Well, I can't teach you anything technically, I know that, but I thought it might be of interest just to see how Node has really helped us from a lean perspective get to a stage where 18 months ago or less we were in a prototyping phase, and now we're in full production mode with our customers on board. But we're fairly ambitious, and those money problems I spoke about at the beginning of the journey have been resolved. We've got backing, we've got cash in the bank, and we're now looking to build our sort of sister product. And our sister product is going to be pretty much the same product, but providing an automated invigilation solution. So at the moment we've got live supervisors, and that's really useful in terms of those high-stake exams, and our customers feel much more comfortable having that human intervention, but we also see that there's big business for a much lower price point in terms of having that. So we're hoping to obviously reuse a lot of our Node in that, probably in a Chrome packaged app. Hoping to be able to push that to an offline mode as well. We've got lots of ambitions in there, but a really meaty project that we're about to set up. And for that, we're looking for a developer or two here in Dublin to supplement our Farshore team, who will continue working on our existing product. So what are we looking for? Okay, so this is my wish list in terms of this. I want somebody who can work with me, who can do a little bit of blue sky thinking, perhaps, and who's creative, not necessarily in the UX world. I mean more from a how do you approach problems, and can you approach them in a creative manner. Somebody who is a great team player and hopefully a potential leader of TestReach in the future. Somebody who likes customers and understands why they're necessary, doesn't mind talking to them every now and again. Somebody who can stay calm in the face of fire and catastrophe all around them, which happens on a frequent basis. Somebody who maybe isn't quite the full article yet, happy to work with somebody who's got the potential to become all these crazy things that I want in my lead. And finally, somebody with a sense of adventure who likes the idea. So, kind of appealing to you as people in this community. If you know anybody, or you are that person who I've talked about, feel free to get in touch. And those are my details. Thank you very much.